Hello, everyone, and welcome to NEMO's webinar on how do we measure audiences holistically in the digital age. My name is Mira. I'm from the NEMO office. NEMO, the network of European museum organizations. One of our main activities includes capacity building for our members and museum professionals in Europe and beyond, such as those webinars, but also trainings and workshops, and a mentoring program for museum educators. NEMO also has working groups such as LEM with a focus on learning and education, and SEC on sustainability and climate action, and the working group Digital Transformation. Our guest and facilitator today, a specialist on audience measurement, is Casey Scott-Songin. Welcome, Casey. Casey did a research for the working group Digital Transformation in the last year, and the publication, Connected Journeys, Holistic Audience Measurement in the Age of Digital, was released in December 2024. We are looking forward to hearing more about the publication in the following hour. At the end of the webinar, you have the possibility to ask questions to KC, so please use the chat function to write down your questions. We have turned on the live caption. You can choose if you would like to see them or not. The captions do not work on mobile devices, though. That was all from me now, so let's get started. KC, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to present today. So, there we go. So today I'm going to walk you through a really basic introduction and overview of the publication that came out in December, as Mira just mentioned, called Connected Journeys, Holistic Audience Measurement in the Age of Digital. But before we get into that, I just wanted to do a quick introduction about who I am and what I'm doing here. So I'm an audience researcher with over a decade of experience in qualitative and quantitative research for museums and galleries. I'm based in the UK. I started my career in museums as a UX researcher in the digital team at the British Museum. I spent 4 years as the senior manager of data and insight at the National Gallery. And then I've been working freelance for the last 3 years now. And I've also just recently started as the senior manager of audience research and insight at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So I'm also the founder and director of The Creative Researcher, and this is a company that's dedicated to helping cultural, heritage, and charity sectors better understand their audiences, both on-site and online audiences. Through The Creative Researcher, I've worked with organizations such as Tate, the Museum of London, the Cooper Hewitt Design Smithsonian Museum in New York, and of course the V&A. So, the purpose of the webinar today is to walk you through this new publication. This publication was the result of a long and rigorous process we undertook to look at the digital audience measurement across museums in Europe. Today, I'll be walking you through some of the highlights of this report, and Rebecca will be putting the link to the full report in the chat for anyone who'd like to learn more about anything we've covered today. And of course, you're always welcome to reach out to me directly, either in the Q&A that will happen at the end of this webinar or directly at any point after this webinar. But before we dive into the report, I have 2 questions for you. I want to learn a little bit about you. This is a webinar about research, after all. So let me know which country your organization is in, and what is the size of the organization you're representing today. Rebecca's going to put up a poll now, and I'll give you all 1 minute to answer before we quickly look at the results. One of the reasons I'm asking these questions is because as part of the process of researching and writing this report, we all felt really strongly that the methods discussed in this paper could be applicable to organizations of all sizes and all different stages of their digital maturity journey. So as I take you through the different aspects of the report, know that the report itself goes into much more detail and will hopefully be applicable and useful to museums of all sizes and competencies in digital audiences. But it's really interesting to see. I can see the results. We'll publish them in just a second. But we've got quite a mix of sizes and countries represented here. Yeah, Rebecca, if you don't mind publishing the results just to show everyone what we've got. All right, from the presenter view, I'm not sure you were able to see that, but it was almost evenly spread across all of the categories we had for the size, and then the countries, it was quite a wide range. So I'm welcome so much to everyone who's here, and I'm really, really excited that you've decided to join us today. Okay, so let's get into what I'm going to try to cover today. I'm going to walk you through the different sections of the report. And again, as I mentioned, we're just going to touch briefly on what's in those sections. And then if you want to learn more about anything I've spoken about today, feel free to check out the full report, or again, feel free to reach out to me. We're going to start with a quick introduction of the background of why this report came to be, and then the methodology we used in this report. And then I'll talk a bit about understanding the landscape of digital audience measurement in museums. We're going to dig into considerations for measuring digital audiences. And then we're going to look at 3 categories of digital audience measurement. And that will make a little more sense once we get to that section. And then finally, we're going to talk about ways to create a digital audience data collection and measurement strategy and why that's important for your organization. And then finally, looking into the future and some conclusions before having a bit of time for Q&A. So, in 2023, NEMO published a report called Audience Measurement in the Digital Era, where they highlighted 5 museum-specific challenges within digital audience measurement. This particular paper was commissioned to investigate how to uncover digital audience motivations, needs, and decision-making expectations, how to implement a comprehensive approach to digital audience measurement, and how to understand how to quantify digital audiences in a consistent manner across the sector. And finally, how to define what a digital audience is and determine if and how digital and physical visits complement each other. This paper also aims to investigate how museums approach digital audience measurement and how they've approached it in the past, highlight present-day examples of museum audience measurement, and define opportunities for the future of digital audience measurement in European museums. So I approached this in 3 different ways. The first was we did a literature review, and this focused on studies that had been published or written and conducted within a European context. And this was really to look at what has happened in the museum sector for digital audience measurement, how things have changed, and where there were potential examples of how digital audience measurement was showing up in the museum context. I then conducted a series of interviews with practitioners across Europe that examined the current digital audience measurement practices within European museums. The examples covered a range of different museum sizes, different regions in the EU, and different approaches to digital audience measurement. We won't be going through all of the sparkling cases during this presentation, but there are 8 cases in the report, and today I'll touch briefly on 4 of them. And finally, we developed a roadmap that it was a workable roadmap for museums of all sizes to help them plan and integrate digital audience measurement into their operational and knowledge practices. So, without further ado, let's dive into this topic. Digital audience measurement is not a unique proposition. In fact, across corporations, charities, and almost every type of organization, digital audiences have played a crucial role in their product development, commerce, and marketing practices. We also know that digital audiences continue to play an increasingly important role in museums. From digital products audiences can interact with during a physical visit, like interactives, VR, AR, immersive, even audio guides, to online galleries, to online collections, websites, social media. Digital audiences are prevalent across a variety of ways visitors can interact with a museum. Consequently, the motivations and behaviors of digital audiences have been topics of research for decades, and a great deal of knowledge about digital audiences and how to measure them can be applied to arts and cultural organizations. However, COVID-19 brought a swift spotlight to the value of digital platforms as museum doors were closed, sometimes for the first time in decades, and visitor engagement was limited to pre-existing online platforms. In a survey commissioned by NEMO in 2021 on the impact of COVID-19 on museums in Europe, they found that while 93% of museums who responded had increased or started online services, 75% had increased or started online social media, 53% had increased or begun to create video content during the pandemic. This did not necessarily translate into digital audience measurement, given that almost 40% said they either did not track or did not know their online visitor numbers. This really put the necessity of, and lack of, digital audience measurement to the front of many's minds. The lack of data meant making decisions about digital audience, like ways that museums were interacting with digital audiences, meant that making decisions about them became really difficult, as museums lacked the knowledge and information about who their digital audiences were and how their digital audiences behaved. Furthermore, the digital transformations that took place at museums during COVID-19 drew attention to the discrepancies in digital maturity and resilience across the museum sector. Here we have a quote from Paulina Nicolaou, and she says, "Museums with prior digital infrastructure and strategy were in a more advantageous position to deal with the effects of the pandemic than less digitally mature museums. This brought to the fore persisting problems in the digital transformation of museums, including the digital divide, in terms of inequality and access to digital infrastructure among visitors and museums alike, differences in revenue streams, and in digital capacity, as well as the need for museums to adapt to the new paradigm of digital-only visits." As Ross Perry and Vince Zekin argue, this was the moment that showed how critical the integration of digital is to the future of the museum. While COVID-19 was the catalyst for many digital transformation projects within the museum sector, it also increased the divide between museums with established digital adoption models and those earlier on in the adoption scale. But looking at behaviors since the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen that there were fundamental shifts in audience behavior. That means that museums can no longer ignore the importance of digital audiences. And with key changes in audience behavior and the increased digital expectations of visitors as a result of the digitization of museums during lockdowns, it's become more critical than ever for museums to understand and cater to digital audience behavior, needs, and motivations. Understanding digital audience behaviors and motivations is going to help museums to stay relevant for their visitors while prioritizing any future digital spending wisely and effectively. So what do we mean when we say digital audiences? So digital audiences could come from a variety of ways, and you can see here there are 3 different ways that visitors will interact with a museum. So in terms of digital platforms, we're talking about museum-owned websites or digital platforms, museum-owned social media channels, external third-party websites and platforms such as TripAdvisor, Google Arts and Culture, things like that, digital products that use technology, so AR, VR, apps, things like that, third-party or national digitized libraries or catalogs, and even things like email and CRM systems. These are all places that audiences may interact with a museum digitally. And you can see that there are certain audiences that will only ever interact with a museum from via these platforms, and they'll never visit on site. We also have on-site visits, of course, and within an on-site visit, you might have digital products that use on-site technology, kiosks, AR, VR, interactives, things like that. You're also going to have audiences that only ever visit on site but still may be interacting with digital products while they're there. And then of course you have audiences that are going to interact in some way, possibly and most likely at different times on site as well as online. So an important distinction to be made here about all of this is the difference between a visitor and a visit. A visit is a single visit to either a digital platform or a physical site. This can be a visit to an owned website or a physical museum location. A single visit may often include interacting or visiting multiple platforms, but the current data collection technologies often make it difficult to measure a visit across multiple platforms. So, this is why museums often prefer to count audiences by measuring visits individually by platform. What do I mean by that? So, for example, a visit might be a visit to the gallery or a museum is counted as one visitor, but one visit. While they're on site, they may go on the website, but right now it's very difficult to connect visits online with a visit on site. So you'll have one visit to the website. Thinking about those then become 2 different visits: a visit to a website, visit to on site, or a visit to, say, a social media page. A visitor can make many visits across many different platforms, and these visits can vary. So, for example, a visitor is a person who may, at any point in their life, come to the museum, go to the website, go to, look at things on social media, interact with a digital interactive. That all of those different experiences all add up to one visitor. Understanding the full visitor experience across all owned and non-owned platforms can be difficult. A visitor may, for example, visit a museum-owned website, a nationally digitized collection on a third-party national website, and an on-site museum. So this is where something called visitor journey mapping can be really important. And I have provided an example here. So it's a bit there. I know it's quite small because there's a lot on here, so it's hard to read, but there are a lot of really good examples online. The example I've listed here is Elena and Anna from the National Museum in Tyson in Spain, looking at creating visitor journey mapping for the museum. So what can this ecosystem look like in practice? This type of tool can help an organization understand what a visitor is doing across different types of visits. So for example, This is going to articulate a typical journey a visitor may take across both digital and physical spaces. So, for example, someone goes on the website to plan their visit to the museum. They then, on the day of, go to Instagram to look at any recent pictures anyone has posted about upcoming exhibitions, or exhibitions they had visited, to decide whether they want to go to the exhibition when they're on site. Then they go to a museum, they walk around in the museum, they look at the shop, decide not to buy anything there because they don't want to carry it around for the rest of the day. But they go home, they go online and see that there's an online shop, and they purchase something. That's, there's many different iterations of what a visitor journey may look like, but that's just one example. Ultimately, visitor journey mapping exercises often highlight the needs and opportunities to make the overall visitor experience more cohesive and easier for visitors to do what they wish to do across multiple platforms. So, why does digital audience measurement matter, and how does it fit into a cultural institution? As digital practices continue to become more mainstream, visitor behavior and expectations continue to shift, causing digital means and opportunities to become more and more critical to museum practices. And while for many museums this can feel like an unnecessary strain on already limited resources, there are many opportunities that focused planning and development for digital audiences can provide. Beyond understanding the wider visitor journey across online and on-site spaces, there's also significant opportunities for museums in understanding and measuring digital audiences. So, for example, through digital audience research, museums can better understand exactly who their potential audiences are and where their potential reach lies, and therefore start to imagine ways to engage with these audiences in more meaningful ways. One such example, based on knowing where digital audiences live, could be to determine what languages are most relevant when it comes to creating content. This could open up the museum to more global audiences, which could result in new and innovative income streams, for example. Digital technologies can also create many opportunities to provide a more accessible and inclusionary experience, both online and on site. Digital audience measurement is one way to identify access needs for current and potential audiences, or to test new inclusionary products, content, or experiences. So, for example, understanding on site access needs for large archaeological sites would enable potential on site visitors to plan their visits in advance in order to access seating where they need it. Digital audience research could help to identify how to develop the digital content necessary to support these access requirements. This process would make digital content meaningful and successful if designed and tested in advance, and would cater to the widest possible audience. So, what we begin to see is that the measurement of online and on site audiences together can play a role not just in gaining a better understanding of a museum's full audience reach and visitor behavior, but also in starting to shift the way museums plan and deliver their programming, education, and development practices so as to create wider reach and greater impact in general. The COVID-19 era, in which many museums closed their doors for extended periods of time and moved to digital only models, and the subsequent reopening and return to normalcy, provided that digital activities were not a threat to on site audience engagement. In fact, it has since become clear how each type of visit, whether on site or online, can lead to different and often complementary experiences. The ability not only to plan for and deliver both online and on site experiences, but also to measure them holistically, can help to uncover the greater impact these combined activities are able to create. So, finally, with online platforms providing greater potential for interaction between audiences and museums, digital audience measurement can play a large role in identifying and developing ways for active engagement with digital audiences. Examples of this could include social media engagement, such as comments, direct conversations with digital audiences inspired by museum-generated content, forums, critical conversations or responses to museum artifacts, or programs via owned and associated web platforms. Understanding how audiences engage with other museums and organizations digitally, and also identifying ways a museum can engage with audiences more actively via digital platforms, can help to develop a strategy that results in meaningful impact and extended reach with current and potential audiences. So you may be thinking, this is all great, but how do we actually measure digital audiences? So, when measuring digital audiences, we have two types of research methodologies available. I mean, in general, when doing any sort of research, you basically have two types of research methodologies available. Quantitative research methodologies help us to easily define what digital audiences are doing, and qualitative research methodologies help uncover why digital audiences do what they do. And this is obviously really simplified version, and we can go back and forth as to whether, there will obviously be qualitative methods that do the what and quantitative that do the why, but just something that's easy to remember is thinking about quantitative will help us understand what, and qualitative will help us understand why. So what are some examples of methodologies within these categories? Quantitative methodologies could include surveys, website analytics, social media analytics, digital product usage data, CRM data, things like task analysis, getting people to do things on a website and see how easy it is for them to accomplish those tasks. Qualitative methodologies may include things like interviews, focus groups, observations, card sorting, things like participatory design, co-creation, diary studies, and sometimes surveys if you're looking for open text boxes, qualitative responses. For me, the real value is being able to understand both what audiences are doing and why they're doing it. Mixing qualitative and quantitative methods can often provide data more creatively and flexibly, with potentially smaller data sets building on one another to form a more cohesive picture of audience behaviors and motivations. This combined approach also means that data can be collected more regularly, leading to better measurement and monitoring practices without having to spend lots of time and resources on larger scale one-off research studies. Additionally, while using multiple methods for data collection may sound counterintuitive to smaller organizations or teams with fewer resources, actually, using creative approaches more regularly can often be a more efficient and cost-effective method and help to solve issues around having only smaller audiences or resources with which to conduct research. But how do quantitative and qualitative methods work together? Let's take an example of understanding who our on-site and online audiences are. To start to understand the type of person who's visiting and what their behaviors are, we have access to quantitative data such as demographics and web pages visited through website analytics, as well as potentially customer relationship management, CRM data, such as, say, ticket sales. However, one aspect of audience measurement that has typically been the responsibility of a more qualitative research methodology is understanding who is visiting digital or physical sites. In looking at both the quantitative and qualitative data, we can start to paint a more detailed picture of who our online and on-site audiences are. So, for example, in understanding who, we might be looking at exit surveys or intercept interviews and things like that, combined with the analytics. So it is important here to point out that the question of who is visiting is a complex one, and that's why I chose to talk about it today. The collection of digital analytics data around demographics is highly regulated through policies such as the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, as the question of who is visiting has historically been a key audience measurement. It is important to think about both the relevance of demographic data in contemporary digital audience measurement practices, as well as the legal and ethical collection of demographic and other personally identifiable information, or PII, in conjunction with quantifiable behavioral data. So this is a whole conversation we could get into. I'm just touching on it here. There is more information in the report, but just as something to note, that as we start to get into this world of data collection, there's important things to think about in terms of security, data storage, and ethics of collecting certain types of information. So there are many different audience questions that can be answered via audience measurement strategies, from understanding what audience motivations are to how well they're able to complete the tasks they're hoping to carry out, to what they've learned, to how satisfied they are, and what impact they've experienced through their interactions with the museum. There are equally numerous ways to collect the type of information needed to answer those questions. So it's important for museums to think about what metrics and what information, what data, will best help them to make audience-led decisions within their organization, and develop a measurement strategy around the ability to collect the data necessary within the resources available to the organization. The previous NEMO report that I mentioned earlier, Audience Measurement in the Digital Era, which this current paper aims to build on, proposed dividing audience measurement into 3 different categories. The first is digital audience monitoring, and this is an ongoing process that involves the continuous and systematic observation of a phenomenon or phenomena. The second is digital audience measurement, and that is going to be a specific action of data acquisition that involves the determination and description of a phenomenon or phenomena. So I'll get into more detail as to what each of these mean and what this actually looks like. And then finally, a digital audience research study. This is the creation of new knowledge and the use of existing knowledge in a new and creative way to generate new concepts, methodologies, and understandings. So let's talk about digital audience monitoring. Monitoring digital audiences enables museums to determine if their programs, events, or activities, online or on-site, have had an impact on digital audiences. Changes up or down over a long period of time can act as a starting point for future investigation into what has worked or what is not working as well. Furthermore, monitoring is often passive and doable with little effort, as many social media tools are already available, and tools such as Google Analytics have become ever easier to set up. Digital audience monitoring is only as useful as the metrics and KPIs originally set by the museum, along with the museum's use of the collected data to make decisions. Collecting data just for the sake of it, but without any data interrogation, can negatively impact staff by making them feel like they're doing useless work, or create missed opportunities for the organization to correct its course if something goes wrong. So when we're thinking about setting up a digital audience monitoring project or process, metrics and KPIs should be chosen with consideration, and in order to be effective, be clear in the way that each number can impact a decision within the museum. So, metrics are often single numbers collected directly through an analytics tool or data collection technique rather than created by a formula. They frequently require little interpretation and should be used to monitor the performance of something over time. So a typical metric might include website visit, first time or repeat visit on the website or page dwell time, number of social media followers or subscribers, impressions or reach on social posts, likes or comments or shares on social media posts, ticket sales, number of app downloads, attendance numbers, number of digital products or users who've seen interacted with a digital product, number of clicks or downloads. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just to give you an idea of what metrics might be. And the important thing to think about when choosing metrics to track is what is the value and what is the organization going to make decisions about. So, for example, if the organization sets a goal to increase repeat visits on the website, because they want deeper engagement with content, for example, so they could track first time versus repeat visits over time. And you can start to see if you're converting first time visitors or visits to come back again and to become repeat visits over time. And if you're not seeing that, you can start to test how to create more engaging content, or maybe it's making the website easier to navigate so that you can find additional content, or maybe it's publishing new content or blog posts more regularly so that people have a reason to come back. And then if you had been monitoring this all along, you can start to see if there's an uptick in repeat visits with each of these different types of changes you're making in content, for example. So KPIs, or key performance indicators, are formulas that investigate a certain behavior. So regularly monitored metrics and KPIs should be used to make decisions on how well a product or a platform is performing, and should be examined regularly for opportunities to iterate on a product or approach. So KPIs might include engagement rate, uptake of a digital product while visiting on site, number of visitors who participated in a learning event, digital or in person, visitor satisfaction, or engagement or attendance of a specific target audience. I want to highlight just a few of the sparkling cases that are included in this report. I've included 2 cases that look at examples of digital audience monitoring that I'll take you through now. The first is a large institution with 245 full-time equivalent staff, and the second is a museum in Italy with 9 full-time equivalent staff. So the first is the National Gallery in London. In 2019, with the support of an agency called Analytics Engines, the National Gallery built a dashboard called Perspective to monitor both on-site and online audiences in as near real time as possible. The dashboard was developed to be accessible to all staff members and incorporated a variety of manual and automated data sources. It was originally developed after it was realized that because of siloed working in the organization, there wasn't necessarily an easy or centralized way to understand who was coming to the museum and what they were doing. So, for example, the digital team knew about digital audiences, the visitor services team was collecting on-site audience attendance data, the learning team had information about people participating in learning activities, but there wasn't a centralized place for all of this to be collected in an easy way. So furthermore, little was known about digital audiences, and with some major website redevelopment projects in the strategy, the organization wanted to better understand how the online platforms could support both online and on-site visits. The data and insight team are continuing to develop new and existing dashboards to meet the needs of the various teams within the organization to a greater degree. As teams have become more familiar with using these dashboards, they've been able to better articulate and define their own data needs, feeding into the development process themselves. Their next dashboards will start to investigate how to visualize that visitor journey across both on-site and online spaces more completely. And yeah, let's see. Let's go to the next one. So, while Perspective was definitely an ambitious multi-year project, I wanted to highlight a case of a digital audience audience monitoring that shows that you can effectively create an audience monitoring system with a small team and limited resources. The Museo della Ceramica di Savona in Savona, Italy, undertook an initial project with the help of BAM Strategy Culturali on the development of a new segmentation for audiences. They focused on particular audiences they wished to engage with and developed detailed profiles of these audiences. This new segmentation helped the museum to develop a data collection system that enabled staff to collect data and segment all of their on-site visitors and start looking at how their online platforms serviced their audiences. This new data collection system was then used to build a quarterly report in order to gain an understanding of how well they were achieving their strategic goals through their exhibition and learning program. Looking at this information holistically, team members were able to set data-driven strategic goals and then track how successfully they were able to target and engage with these specific audiences. So, for example, when they started the project, they were able to determine that only 11% of their audiences were actually local residents. As a key goal to reach local people, they developed local campaigns and programming to attract these local audiences. Within the year, using audience monitoring, they were able to see that this had increased to 71%, which is an over 500% increase. Audience measurement enabled them to verify that monitoring the public was useful and to understand how their activities were having an impact. The team have gone on to use digital audience insights to try extending their reach internationally, running a digital campaign in France based on the insight that many of their on-site international visitors were from France. And while they did not necessarily see the conversion from the digital public that they expected, it enabled them to expand their digital awareness and learn new ways to engage with digital audiences. So the next is digital audience measurement. So projects that measure digital audiences often focus on answering a specific question, making them generally actionable and meaningful to the organization. Furthermore, light touch and focused projects can often be undertaken with limited resources, staff, or time. There are many digital tools and software available to support digital audience measurement, with a wide variety of methodologies to enable potentially creative and flexible solutions. That being said, digital audience measurement is something that can be done with relatively few resources and small amounts of time if the tools and processes are in place to do so. For example, having approved and integrated survey tools within the museum, such as an example I'll be showing you in a second, means staff can run their own quick surveys related to their own products and programming without relying on specialists to do the research for them, because essentially the work has been done by specialists and upfront. And while it's certainly possible to measure digital audiences as one-off projects, having these types of methodological tools available to the organization are critical in implementing and democratizing a digital audience measurement strategy that's easy and effective, even with small teams. Some reasons why a museum might want to do a digital audience measurement project: maybe to investigate a change in a metric discovered during monitoring, so to understand why a key metric has gone up or down; to evaluate an event, a product, an exhibition that has a limited time frame; to iterate on a product, such as an audio guide or a website, in order to make small changes that increase user friendliness, revenue potential, or overall satisfaction of the product; maybe to understand the impact of a recent change has made to a product, or to support the development of a new product strategy or plan. So the K-EVA tool was originally developed by the Classic Stiftung Weimar, apologies for not saying that correctly, in Germany. This was developed during the COVID-19 pandemic in order to reach and survey digital audiences. This was done in collaboration with an agency. The tool itself was developed through iterative audience research. And in the development process, the central concern was to make surveys more entertaining and varied, and to adapt the evaluation tool to the diverse offers of the museum. The tool was designed to integrate into museums' existing applications, from digital products to kiosks to the website, in a simple way. The K-EVA tool makes it possible to carry out small, short surveys on a wide range of offers without a great deal of effort and to evaluate them quickly, thus integrating evaluation processes into day-to-day business. This survey building tool also allows for a variety of creative survey question formats in the hope that a more varied and entertaining survey will help to increase participation and engagement in audience feedback. The final one is a research study. So this is a concentrated piece of research, and it can go a long way to remain relevant for years across a variety of departments, projects, and programs. Digital audience research studies can help to unite an organization around a particular audience, leading to easier and more aligned data-driven decision-making across the organization. And while these digital audience research projects can sometimes be more involved, their outputs are often more impactful, meaningful, and relevant in a way that smaller studies can't necessarily deliver. Having deep and meaningful insights into digital audiences can be really successful in developing products capable of bringing in additional revenue or increase overall impact and learning outcomes for both online and on-site audiences. Large research studies often need to be developed and conducted by research professionals or those with specific skill sets in digital audience research. This can sometimes make them costly or take longer periods of time to accomplish, and they do need to be planned in advance. But research studies, that could be useful in large development projects should be incorporated into the planning phases as early as possible. Smaller museums and organizations can still conduct large research studies, especially if the project itself becomes a collaboration with other museums or maybe data collecting organizations. There is a lot of opportunity for overlapping insights to be relevant and significant, and collaborations can decrease the need for specialized skill sets within particular organizations and also reduce the overall cost of these types of projects. So some examples could be creating digital audience segmentation, digital visitor journey mapping, researching to develop a new digital product, deep dives onto digital audience needs to inform marketing or comms, development of a digital user requirement or stories to inform product development, large-scale usability testing on websites or digital products. So I really wanted to share this case for a couple of reasons. The first is that Museum was able to implement a large-scale research study that led to being a data-led design process for a digital product, so in this case, an audio guide, as well as learning and development for the way staff, volunteers, and even other organizations could use the tools that had been developed. Before starting to develop the audio guide application, the team did research around what the market had to offer. They tested different applications, focusing on what features were necessary and what made the application easier to use for audiences. They then designed their own web application based on the findings from web applications already available on the market. Museum is a private museum launched in 2020. It's storytelling-led with 3 personal narratives told through an audio guide. The physical museum space is used to house artifacts that support the stories within the audio guide. After testing the web application for 2 years, it became clear through audience behaviors and feedback that things could be improved and that the experience the visitors had while using the audio guide could be enhanced. Once the web application had been developed, they implemented a monitoring system to track how visitors were using the audio guide and what their preferences were through analytics, and also to monitor the rating of the system and the impact of the visit on visitors via feedback surveys within the application itself. Through this monitoring system, they've been able to make key changes to the audio guide and overall experience. Now, I want to briefly touch on something that I think is absolutely critical to the success of digital audience measurement. This is obviously a lot of information. This is all in the report, so please do check it out. One of the best ways to begin implementing digital audience measurement is to identify and create a data collection strategy for the organization. Such strategies help to prioritize the data required for a one-off project and the data needed for ongoing measurement and monitoring. Furthermore, data collection strategies help to design the process for capturing and analyzing data, creating ownership for audience measurement, deliver a clear timeline to set up needed processes, democratize access, and encourage audience data-driven decision-making within the organization. Data collection strategies can be simple or as complicated as the available expertise and resources allow. But deciding and documenting a process for audience data collection is still a really important step for any size team. From sophisticated dashboards to simple monthly emails with 3 key pieces of data, having a data collection strategy ensures that the organization is utilizing the skills, resources, and knowledge of the team in the best way possible. So, looking to the future, audience measurement has long been integral to the arts and cultural sector, with many museums and galleries employing established evaluation techniques to grasp audience engagement and visitation patterns. While exit surveys and intercept interviews have always been mainstays for evaluating on-site experiences, the proliferation and accessibility of data, such as ticketing, sales, membership, attendance data, have enabled museums to integrate more data-driven decision-making into visitor experience strategies. As museums increasingly explore digital interventions and the convergence of digital and physical experiences, it becomes imperative for professionals and researchers to develop research and evaluation methods that consider the experience as a unified whole, rather than distinct digital and physical entities. Bridging that gap between methodologies that assess purely digital and on-site experiences is essential to comprehensively understand the visitor journey across digital and on-site interactions. Furthermore, as digital audience measurement tools have become more accessible and more prevalent, organizations no longer need specific skill sets to deliver these different types of research, which could effectively democratize research across the organization. However, given the abundance of audience data accessible to museum practitioners, it is important to consider the legal and ethical implications of data collection. This is especially necessary as organizations start to implement AI in their operational practices and machine learning processes start gaining the ability to find and create insights from data. It is therefore crucial for researchers and museum staff to consider the rationale behind collecting data in digital interventions, identify the necessary data for comprehending behaviors and motivations, and utilize both traditional and digital qualitative and quantitative research methods to convey a more comprehensive and meaningful narrative about impact and success measures that go beyond visit counts. So thinking about digital and physical audiences holistically, the definition of digital audiences must be considered holistically in order to incorporate audience needs both on-site and online. Museums, national organizations, and funding bodies need to think about audiences holistically across these physical and digital spaces. This way, digital audience measurement will continue to support museums in capturing and communicating the impact and relevance of museums today. The fragmented nature of many digital products, which are often conceived and funded independently of each other, contributes to an inconsistent and unsustainable approach that leads to a lack of data integration into a broader audience measurement ecosystem. In order to achieve sustainable and effective change, the way in which many digital products are conceived and funded must change. Funders must find ways to support museums to develop more integrated digital audience strategies, allowing for long-term value of digital products within holistic digital ecosystems and unified digital audience measurement. The importance of trained personnel, external advice, and the right equipment is also important. Advances in technology around data collection and management offer more diverse and potentially cheaper possibilities to implement such strategies. While this reduces the cost of accessing data-driven technologies, the abundance and velocity of data poses new challenges for museums and requires new skills and strategies for digital knowledge management. This requires trained personnel, external advice, and appropriate equipment in museums. Legal requirements pose challenges for museums in the field of digital audience measurement. Museums must be aware and comply with GDPR. This regulation states that museums, like other organizations, have a duty to collect only useful data and avoid storing extraneous information. This does require an intentional data strategy that should be driven by senior leaders in the museum to gain organization-wide alignment and adoption. And finally, new developments in the field of AI, some of which are closely linked to digital data collection, must be considered carefully as they raise ethical concerns, particularly regarding data protection, copyright, and energy consumption. New regulations such as the EU AI Act will undoubtedly continue to play a large role in the way digital audience is collected, managed, and interpreted moving forward. As we look to the future of digital audience measurement, it's easy to see opportunity where better understanding of digital audiences can lead to more creative museums being able to use both their physical and digital platforms to provide engaging and meaningful experiences. Blurring the lines between on-site and online experiences and thinking about these audiences as one will only help to develop strategies that create significant impact and learning opportunities. Audience-led design and development can lead to true innovation in storytelling, interpretation, learning, and even revenue generation for the museums of the future. Understanding audience needs across both digital and physical spaces through audience measurement practices will only decrease the cost and resource risks of developing new audience experiences that museums know their audiences will love, but will also help to drive innovation within the museum space, pushing the boundaries of what is possible when it comes to delivering impactful and educational visitor experiences. So I know I've covered a lot here today, but it just scrapes the surface of what's in the paper. I highly encourage you to check out this paper if you haven't already. And of course, you are more than welcome to reach out to me at any time if you're looking for support or advice on your path to implement digital audience measurement within your organization. Feel free to drop me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Casey, for this hour full of input. Wow, a lot of information. And throughout the webinar, we had quite some questions. I think you covered a lot of them, but then there were specific questions about the role of AI and more questions about the customer journey and also the measurement of different age groups. But regarding the time and also that you have spoken a lot, I think we are super lucky that we have the publication and your contact. And you might receive 100 of emails. I don't know, but yeah, I think people were very grateful. A lot of thank you from everywhere. A super insightful presentation with a lot of content. So I would say people can get in touch with you if that is an offer from you.
Yes,
And
of course, please do.
and we keep on together this journey. And I thank you a lot for today.
Thank you so much.